Go to a place where the sky is so close you can touch it. Enter the Altiplano, the Andean Plateau, 4,000 meters above sea level. The air here is so thin it burns your lungs, and the sun is a relentless tormentor. At night, the cold is so intense it can shatter rocks. This is a land of extremes. By all human logic, no civilization can thrive here. But it was here that the greatest civilization in the Americas arose. And they did it not with gold, not with steel, but with something humble, buried underground. For thousands of years, the world has searched for El Dorado, the city of gold. They have looked in the wrong place. The real treasure of the Andes is not what glitters, it is what nourishes. This is not a story about gold. This is a story about a secret that lies deep beneath the dry earth. A secret whispered among priests, guarded by shamans, and given by a deity who lives not in the sky, but in the ground beneath your feet, a goddess named Pachamama. And this is the story of her, of Mother Earth, and of the ancient covenant sealed in the potato fields. Before the Inca kings, before the stone paths, before time itself, there was only the harsh highlands. The first people who migrated here faced a simple truth. The ground was their enemy. Frost killed the seeds. Drought withered the corn. Earthquakes swallowed houses. They looked up to the sky, praying to Inti, the sun god. But Inti was too far away, yellow and indifferent. They prayed to the Apu, the great snow mountain spirits, but the Apu were silent. Yet there was one god who was never silent, one god who was everywhere. They felt her in every step. They heard her in the thunder of a landslide. They tasted her in the water of a stream. They called her Pachamama, Mother Earth. Pachamama is not a gentle, giving mother. She is a primordial deity, a deity of actual survival. She is the womb of life, but also the tomb that swallows the dead. She represents a single fundamental cosmic law, Aini. Aini means reciprocity, a sacred balance. You cannot just take. If you take without paying, Pachamama will reclaim it. She will take your crops with frost, your livestock with plague, or your life with an earthquake. The early Andean people understood this. They lived in fear and reverence for her. They knew that to survive in this harsh place, they could not dictate to the earth. They had to negotiate with her. Legend has it that during a time of terrible famine, an old, desperate Paco, shaman priest, performed a final rite. He went to a mountaintop, did not eat or drink for days, and chewed sacred coca leaves until his mind left his body. He did not pray to the sky, he prayed to the earth. He asked Pachamama for a gift, something that could withstand the cold, something that could survive the drought, something that could feed her people. And Pachamama, from within Ukupacha, the underworld, her womb, replied. She did not give them corn, the golden seed of the sun god, which grows up to the sky. Instead, she gave them something that grew downward, into the darkness, into her protective embrace. She gave them potatoes. To a stranger, this was not a gift. It was ugly, it was muddy, it grew out of dirt. It looked like a diseased clod of earth. But for the Andeans, it was an absolute miracle. Here's the potato's first secret. It's a divine entity. When the first Andean farmers planted these tubers, they discovered they didn't just survive, they thrived. They grew where nothing else would. They were frost-resistant, they didn't need much water, and they came in countless shapes. There were tubers as deep purple as the night sky, as red as the blood of a sacrificial llama, as yellow as Inti's gold, and as white as Apu's snow. There are thousands of varieties. Each one is a different personality, a different blessing from Pachamama. But the greatest miracle is not just growing, it is preserving. The Andeans noticed something strange. If they left the potatoes on high ground at night, the harsh cold would freeze them. And when the sun beat down during the day, they would thaw. They would trample them to squeeze out the water. Repeat this process for many nights. Freeze, thaw, trample, dry, and the soggy, perishable potato would transform into something else. It turns into chuño. Chuño is the second secret. It is a food rock, a completely dehydrated potato, light as a feather, hard as a rock, and virtually indestructible. It does not mold, it does not rot, it is not attacked by insects. Chuño can be stored not for months, but for decades. A farmer can survive one bad year, then 2, then 5. As long as there are chuños in the barn, there is life. In that moment, the Andean people broke the cycle of famine. They conquered harshness, they found safety. And it was all thanks to the covenant with Pachamama. But the covenant required Aini. She had given them the ultimate gift. Now they had to pay. This is when the potato field ceases to be a field. It becomes an altar. Potato growing became an elaborate religious ritual. The secret of potato farming was not in the technique of farming, it was in the attitude toward farming. You can't just do farming, you have to live farming. When an Andean farmer prepares to plant, he doesn't start with a plow, he starts with a request. He has to feed Pachamama before he can ask her to feed him. He digs a small hole. He pours in his first and most precious sip of chicha, corn beer. For mother, he whispers. He drops in the most perfect coca leaves, the sacred leaf that connects this world to the spirit world. He prays, Pachamama, please open your womb. Please take these seeds, our children, and nourish them. They call the potatoes kids. They never say harvest. They say receive. Throughout the growing season, they talked to the potatoes. They sang to them. They protected them. And when they dug up the first potatoes, there was a great celebration. The first, most beautiful. The potato was never eaten. It was dressed in small clothes, revered as a god, and kept in the house as a symbol of Mother Earth's generosity. The Andeans understood. Pachamama was not an abstract force. She was a living organism. The potato field was her womb. The farming tools were instruments of birth. And the chuño was her mother's milk, preserved forever. On the basis of this sacred covenant, on the basis of this avlast omorital chuño, something great was built. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and cities joined together into an empire. The Inca Empire, Tawantinsuyu, was not built with gold. Gold was for the sun god, for decoration. Gold is not edible. The Inca Empire was built with potatoes. Their vast colca warehouses spread along 25,000 miles of the Inca Trail were not filled with gold. They were filled with chuño. It was chuño that fed the armies on the move. It was chuño that fed the architects building Machu Picchu. It was chuño that was the insurance, the social safety net that allowed the most complex civilization in the Americas to survive in the harshest place on Earth. They kept their promise. They honored Aini. They fed Pachamama, and in return, Pachamama gave them life. Balance was achieved. The secret was protected. And then, in 1532, ships carrying crosses and cannons arrived. The men came not to negotiate with Earth, they came to plunder her. They were not looking for chuño, they were looking for oro. They don't understand Aini, they don't understand reciprocity, they just take. And for the first time in thousands of years, the ancient pact with Pachamama is about to be broken. The wrath of a betrayed goddess awaits. When Pizarro's conquistadors entered the Inca Empire, they couldn't understand what they were seeing. They saw an empire without currency. They saw giant warehouses filled with chuños, dried potatoes, instead of gold coins. They saw a civilization where wealth wasn't measured by what you owned, but by what you could contribute, give. To them, it was madness. When they captured the Inca czar Atahualpa, he made an offer he thought these strange people might understand. He would ransom his life. He promised to fill a large room, once with gold and twice with silver. To the Incas, this promise was strange. What was gold and silver worth? They were sacred metals, yes. Gold was the sweat of the sun god. Silver was the tears of the moon goddess. They were used to decorate temples. They were used to please the gods of the sky. But they're useless. You can't eat gold. You can't drink silver. You can't build a house with them. Real value, real life, comes from one place only: Pachamama. The conquistadors agreed, and the empire obeyed. Thousands of tons of gold art, priceless masks, exquisite jewelry were brought. The Spaniards did not see art. They did not see religion. They saw weight. They did what the Andeans considered the ultimate sacrilege. They lit furnaces. They melted things down. They turned the sweat of the sun god into crude, lifeless gold. And after they received the ransom, they killed Atahualpa. They didn't just break their promise to a king, they declared war on the universe itself. They violated Aini on a cosmic level. They took everything and gave nothing in return but death. Pachamama began to sense the imbalance. After the gold was taken, the Spanish went in search of silver. And then, in 1545, they found it. They found a place that would reshape world history and become the biggest open wound on Pachamama's body. They found Potosí. It's not a silver mine, it's a silver mountain. A mountain made almost entirely of solid silver, rising 4,800 meters into the sky, in one of the coldest and most desolate places on Earth. To the Spanish, it was a miracle from their god. They called it La Villa Imperial, the imperial city. It quickly became the largest, richest, and most miserable city in the Western Hemisphere. Money from Potosí financed the Spanish king's wars, built palaces in Europe, and fueled the Renaissance. But for the Andeans, Potosí is a waka, a sacred place, a living organ of Mother Earth. And what the Spanish were doing was not mining, it was a vivisection. The Aini violation now became industrialized rape. The Spanish reimposed the Mita system, the forced labor the Incas had used to build temples and roads in return, but the Spanish turned it into a death sentence. Indigenous villages from hundreds of miles around were forced to send their strongest men to Potosí. They didn't call it work, they called it going to the slaughter. When a man was chosen for Mita, his family would hold a funeral for him before he left. They knew he wouldn't return. They were driven into the mouth of hell, the entrance to the mines. Inside, it was a world the sun god Inti never saw. Men and children, some as young as 8, worked in absolute darkness, climbing rickety hide ladders, carrying 40-kilogram sacks of silver ore on their backs. They worked 12-hour shifts, hundreds of meters underground. They chewed sacred coca leaves, not to connect with the gods, but simply to numb hunger, cold, and despair. This is the ultimate blasphemy. Pachamama, Mother Earth, is being torn apart from within by her own children, forced to do so by invaders whose only worship is dead metal. Potosí became a wound that bled silver into Europe and sucked Andean life into obscurity. It is estimated that 8 million indigenous people died in Potosí's mines, buried in collapses, killed by tuberculosis, or poisoned by mercury, which they used to refine silver. They die underground, but not in the arms of Pachamama. They die in an industrial hell of human creation. And where is the potato field in all this? Where is the ancient covenant? It was broken. The best men were in the mines, not in the fields. The terraced fields, andanas, the engineering marvels that had sustained the empire, began to crumble. The irrigation canals were abandoned. And the potato? Despised it. It was Indian food. It was dirt. They grew just enough of it to feed the slave laborers in the mines. They didn't honor it. They didn't sing to it. They didn't feed mother before planting it. They just take. Pachamama, for the first time in millennia, was starved, neglected, humiliated. She was no longer a partner in a sacred covenant. She was simply a raw resource to be exploited. She suffered silently as her children were killed in her womb and her silver blood was drained. This silence is the most terrifying. The Aini balance has been completely disrupted. The universe is dangerously unbalanced. The Spaniards, in their arrogance, thought they had won. They had conquered the men. They had conquered the gods. They had conquered the earth itself. They had taken the gold and silver, and now they were bringing the spoils home. They don't realize one thing. When their galleons, laden with silver from Potosí, set sail for Europe, they carried more than just metal. In the dank, fetid holds, alongside the silver bars, was a furtive passenger, one they considered insignificant. A few sacks of potatoes, brought back as a botanical curiosity from the New World. They thought they were plundering Pachamama. They didn't know they were taking her on board. They didn't know they were bringing an ancient, betrayed god to their own homeland. The conquest is over. The revenge is about to begin. When the potato, that stealthy passenger from the New World, arrived in Europe in the late 16th century, it didn't bring blessings, it brought suspicion. The European continent at that time was a world ruled by what was on the ground. Wheat and barley, the staff of life, rose beautifully toward God in the sky. The food that God blessed was that which rose toward the light. The potato is not. It is an alien. It comes from a land of wild men, as they call it. And worst of all, it grows underground. It grows in the dark, in the mud, where evil, disease, and decay reside. The secret of the potato field, the sacred covenant with Pachamama, was left in the Andes. In Europe, there is no covenant, only disgust. Botanists are puzzled by it. Priests condemn it. Doctors warn against it. They call it the fruit of the devil because it is not mentioned in the Bible. They claimed it caused leprosy because its skin was rough and ugly, like the skin of a sick person. They warn it causes scrofula, tuberculous lymph nodes, and flatulence. German nobles originally grew it only for its flowers, which they used to decorate their hair, but they would never eat its bulbs. In France, it is considered pig food. Eating it is seen as a degrading act, an admission of human failure. In Russia, fanatical peasants of the old Orthodox Church called it Satan's apple and would rather starve than eat it, causing potato riots when the government tried to force them to grow it. The Andean god, a gift from Pachamama, had become an outcast, an ugly exile. For nearly 2 centuries, the potato existed on the margins of European society. It was a curiosity in botanical gardens, a food of last resort for the most desperate, or feed for livestock. Europe continued to live and die according to the relentless cycle of wheat. They lived in constant fear of famine. When the wheat crop failed, due to drought, hail, war, millions died. They died in an orderly, predictable manner, while the potato, which could have saved them, languished in the mud. But Pachamama had one ally that Europe could not dispute: hunger. War ravaged the continent. The 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, devastated the countryside in particular. Wheat was an easy target. A passing army could burn entire wheat fields in minutes, destroying an entire region's food supply. Kings and queens began to panic. They couldn't feed their armies. They couldn't control the bread riots. And then, one man changed everything. Antoine Augustin Parmentier, a French military pharmacist, was taken prisoner by the Prussians. In Prussian prison, he was denied bread. He was forced, day in and day out, to eat the most vile food, potatoes. He waited for death. He waited for leprosy, scrofula, madness. But nothing happened. He not only survived, he thrived. When he was released, Parmentier returned to France with a mission, a revelation. He realized that this cursed food was actually a gift. But how to convince an arrogant country like France to eat pig food? Parmentier didn't fight with logic. He fought with psychology. He knew the French wouldn't eat something that was good for them. They would eat something that was fashionable. He threw the world's first PR dinner. It served nothing but potatoes. Potato soup, potato kebabs, potato bread, potato cheese, and even potato liqueur. The guests? France's most famous people, Benjamin Franklin, the great chemist Antoine Lavoisier, and King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette themselves. They ate it, and they liked it. Marie Antoinette began wearing beautiful purple potato flour in her hair. The potato flour quickly became a must-have fashion accessory among the Versailles aristocracy. But Parmentier's most brilliant move was this. King Louis XVI gave him a plot of barren, substandard land on the outskirts of Paris to grow potatoes. Parmentier planted potatoes there, and then he did something strange. He hired royal soldiers fully armed to guard the potato field, only during the day. The Parisian peasants, who were starving, saw this. They said to themselves, "My God, anything that the king has to send armed soldiers to guard must be extremely valuable." And, just as Parmentier predicted, when the guards went home at night, the peasants sneaked in, stole the potatoes, and took them home to plant in their gardens. Parmentier didn't force them to eat potatoes. He made them believe they were stealing a royal treasure. The wall finally fell. The potato, the exile, was finally accepted. From France, it spread to Prussia, where King Frederick the Great, also using trickery and force, forced farmers to grow it. It spread to Russia. And it spread to a small, wet, fertile island to the west, where an oppressed, landless people would stake their entire existence on the gift of Pachamama. It has come to Ireland. Pachamama, after 200 years of abandonment, finally conquered Europe. She fed them, just as she had fed the Andeans. She saved the continent from starvation. But the Europeans, in their haste to accept her, forgot one essential thing. They forgot the first and most important secret of the potato field. They forgot Eine. They forgot reciprocity. They didn't diversify. They didn't celebrate the thousands of potato personalities. They picked just one, the crumbliest, most productive, easiest to grow potato. In Ireland, it's called the Irish lumper. They planted field after field, millions of acres, of just one potato. They turned a diverse garden into a monoculture desert. They have broken the biodiversity. Laws of Pachamama. They created a system that was terrifyingly fragile. They built an entire nation on a single genetic needle. And Pachamama, the god of balance, noticed the imbalance once again, an imbalance even more dangerous than Potosí. She is no longer a forgotten god. She is a misused god. And the revenge for the second breaking of the covenant will not be a slow, silvery event. It will be swift, like a plague. A great flood is about to come to Ireland. Nowhere in Europe did the potato embrace so completely and recklessly as Ireland. In the early 19th century, Ireland was a tragic place. Under colonial rule, the largely Catholic native population had been dispossessed of their land by English Protestant landlords. They were forced onto the smallest, most infertile plots of land, marshlands and rocky hillsides, where wheat or barley could not be grown. Those crops were reserved for the landlords for export to England. On those plots of land, Irish farmers could grow only one thing to survive, the only thing that could grow in that harsh place and provide enough calories to feed a family. They grew potatoes. And they don't just grow potatoes. They only grow one kind, Irish lumper. Lumper wasn't tasty, it was soggy and bland, but it was incredibly productive. It was a miracle of survival. Thanks to lumper, Ireland's population exploded. From 3 million people, it ballooned to nearly 8.5 million. An entire nation had staked its existence, every meal, every life, on a single plant. They forgot the first and most important secret of Pachamama. In the Andes, Paco shamans know that you can never rely on just one variety. You must grow hundreds of varieties, purple, red, yellow, soft, waxy, in the same field. It is a respect for Aini. It is a respect for the diversity of Mother Earth. And it is a sacred insurance policy. If a plague strikes one variety, the others will survive. But in Ireland, they created a genetic desert. Millions of acres grow just one type potato. The entire island is a genetically identical clone. They created a perfect, fragile system. They gave Pachamama a fatal weakness. They turned a diverse garden into a monoculture. And in 1845, revenge came. It didn't come as an army. It came as a mist. An invisible fungal spore, Phytophthora infestans, drifted across the Atlantic, probably from the Americas themselves. That summer, Ireland's potato fields were green and healthy. A bountiful harvest awaited. Then, in August, it began to rain. A strange, damp mist covered the island. And with the mist came a smell. A sweet, sickly stench, like the smell of decay spreading. The farmers ran into the fields. What they saw horrified them. The potato plants, which had been green and lush just a few days before, were now rotting. The leaves were black and mushy, as if someone had boiled them. The stalks were wilting and collapsing in the mud. In a panic, they began digging. They prayed, hoping the tuber was still safe underground. They stuck their forks down. But what they pulled up wasn't a firm, white lumper potato. What they pulled up was a black, rotting mass, a sludge that smelled unbearably bad. Pachamama didn't just take back her gift. She turned it into a curse. She turned food into poison. In a few short weeks, nearly the entire food supply of 8.5 million people was turned into rotting waste beneath their feet. The punishment has begun. Angorta Mor, the Great Famine. What makes this famine a cosmic blasphemy is not just that it was a crop failure. It was a famine that occurred in the midst of plenty. Blight attacks only one plant, lumper potatoes. All over Ireland, on the estates of English landlords, the golden wheat was still ripening. The barley was still heavy with grain. The cattle were still fat. But the Irish people couldn't touch them. It was the landlord's property. It was the economy. And so the most brutal scene, the final breach of the Aini, took place. While hundreds of thousands of Irish began to starve, their mouths turning green from trying to eat grass, ships still left the ports of Dublin and Cork. Those ships weren't carrying rotten potatoes. They were loaded with wheat, barley, butter, and beef. They were protected by the British Army, transporting food out of a starving land to be sold at a profit in England. Irish farmers didn't just die from a fungus. They died from a system that abused the gift of Pachamama, turning it into a monoculture, and then, when that gift was taken away, let them die rather than share the wealth it had accumulated from other crops. The result was a genocide of indifference. More than 1 million people died. They died in huts, on the roads, in horrific workhouses. They died of hunger, typhus, and dysentery. Families ate their own dogs, cats, and finally, in some cases, their own dead. 2 million others fled. They crammed into rickety coffin ships, carrying disease and despair, fleeing their island home into hell. They took with them violins, sad songs, and a lasting memory of betrayal by man and revenge by nature. Pachamama's revenge was complete. She had been robbed of her silver in Potosí. She had been exploited in Ireland to cultivate monoculture. Both cultures paid the price. Potosí became a ghost town of corpses. Ireland became an island of ghosts and migrants. The humble gift of the potato built an empire in the Andes and destroyed a nation in Europe. It reshaped the world. After the massacre, has the world learned its lesson? They learned to fight blight with chemicals. They learned to diversify their crops, a little. But they forgot the core of the covenant. They forgot Aini. They forgot that you can't just take. And somewhere, deep in the Andes, where potatoes are still farmed the old way, Paco shamans are whispering to Mother Earth. They know that the modern world, with its industrial agriculture, pesticides, and genetically modified crops, is repeating Ireland's mistakes on a global scale. They knew that Pachamama was still watching, and she was very, very patient. The story doesn't end in Ireland. It just pauses. The 20th and 21st centuries saw humans, in their technological arrogance, believing they had conquered Pachamama. They invented chemical fertilizers, pesticides, industrial agriculture, genetic modification. They believed they had broken the cycle of nature. They believed they no longer needed Aini. They could take infinitely. But like Ireland, they have built a global system based on monoculture. Not just lumper potatoes, but wheat, corn, and soybeans. Billions of people are fed by a few fragile, genetically optimized crops, completely dependent on chemicals. And now, Pachamama is starting to reclaim it. Climate change is altering weather patterns. Droughts are destroying grain crops. New drug-resistant diseases are sweeping through monocultures. Once again, the world is facing a simple truth. It is hungry. And in the panic, where did scientists, corporations, and governments turn? They don't look up at the sky. They don't look for new technological solutions. They looked towards the Andes. They returned to the source. They returned to the womb of Pachamama, where the gift had originally been bestowed. They realized that for centuries, while the outside world had exploited, conquered, and destroyed, the Andean farmers, descendants of the Inca Empire, had been silently carrying out their covenant. They didn't just preserve the potato, they kept talking to it. At a place like Parque de la Papa, Potato Park, near Pisac, Peru, indigenous communities led by Paco shamans are not museum keepers. They are innovators. They are actively breeding, adapting, and co-creating Pachamama. They don't grow one variety. They grow more than 1,300 different potato personalities. For them, this is not science. This is family. When Western scientists arrived, they were shocked. They brought computer models that predicted that climate change would make growing potatoes at this altitude impossible in 50 years. The Paco just smiled. They led the scientists up a higher mountain to a new test field. They said, "We know Pachamama is getting hot, so we are teaching our children, potatoes, to climb up the mountain to a cooler place. We have been doing this for thousands of years." The world realized that the real secret wasn't a plant, it was a living genetic library. And the world, in panic that it might lose this library, created its own version of Chunyo. Deep in a mountain in Norway, near the North Pole, they built the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It's a doomsday fortress, a doomsday vault carved into the permafrost. And what's inside there, protected from nuclear war, climate change, and societal collapse? Hundreds of thousands of potato seeds from the Andes. The tech world has finally bowed to Pachamama's wisdom, creating a modern, icy crypt to protect the humble gift that built the Inca Empire. But the Pacos of the Andes know a truth that scientists in Svalbard may have missed. Svalbard is a great archive, but it is a dead archive. It is a library where no one reads. It is missing an essential ingredient. It is missing Aini. In the potato park, when they harvest, they still celebrate. They still feed mother first. They still pour the first sip of chicha on the ground. They still choose the strangest, most unusual potatoes, not to discard them like industrial agriculture, but to honor them, to see what Pachamama is trying to tell them. They knew that seeds are more than genetic material. They were stories. They were relationships. They were a living covenant. The ultimate secret of the potato field, therefore, is not a thing. It is an action. It is a recognition that we are not separate from the earth. We are part of her body, as the potato is part of the field. Pachamama's story is a great loop, from Potosí, where humans tore her apart for silver, to Ireland, where humans abused her with monoculture, and back to Svalbard, where humans are desperately trying to save the diversity they nearly destroyed. Potosí's arrogance led to collapse. Ireland's arrogance led to famine. Today, we are facing a global arrogance, believing that we can take oil, take water, take land, and never give it back. Pachamama, Mother Earth, goddess of cosmic balance, is watching. She is feeling the fever of climate change, the pangs of mass extinction. Aine's imbalance is at dangerous levels. The question is not whether we can save the potato. The question is whether the potato, and the lesson it carries, can save us. Can we remember the ancient covenant? Can we learn once again to feed Mother before we ask her to feed us? Or will Pachamama, in her perfect and terrifying justice, once again be forced to restore the balance herself?